Hey there, students. It's Mr. Sharp here with the second video in our series on Unit 7 in American History 1. We do not have enough time to do introduction, so I'm just going to get right into it real quick. When it says violence escalates, that is a understatement, so let's get into it, shall we? We're going to be talking today about all the stuff that's going to boil into this heated argument in the issue of slavery, up to a point of people bashing each other over the head with clubs and killing each other before the Civil War even starts. So we're going to be talking about the Kansas-Nebraska Act today and how that's going to continue to divide northern and southern politicians. Not only that, but how some different political events are going to shape political parties being emerged at this time, particularly the Republican Party, how Abraham Lincoln is going to make the name for himself, and finally, what's really going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back in the issue, in the divide, and the argument of slavery versus anti-slavery. So let's get into it, shall we? The key terms are right there. They're going to be highlighted in yellow. Make sure you stop the video whenever you need to see it. Let's get into it. All right, so when we last left off, the Compromise of 1850 was just passed. However, this is starting to become problematic because northern and southern politicians don't see it as a compromise. They see it as pandering to the other side. And there's new territories that are wanting to come and be part of the United States, particularly in Kansas and Nebraska. So in the Compromise of 1850, popular sovereignty was passed to allow these territories to kind of choose what they wanted to do. And Stephen Douglas of Illinois, he's going to push forth a bill in Congress to say, hey, let's let Kansas and Nebraska territory hold their own elections in popular sovereignty to where they want to have slavery or not. It's constitutional, it's good. It's democratic. Let's call it a day and see what happens. Well, we'll see a lot of things that have happened wrong on the wrong side. But in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act will pass, allowing for elections to be held and for governors to choose whether they want it to be free soil or slave state or slave area. So what's going to happen because of this? Well, Americans are going to want to settle in Kansas to make farms, but they're also going to want to get there quickly to rig elections in favor of their side. Both northern and southern Americans are going to get over to Kansas as quickly as they can, hold elections quickly, just to say, hey, this is an anti-slavery state. You can't come here if you were bringing slaves. While on the other side, it's like, oh, this area is all about slavery. So bring your property and everything, and it'll be okay. So this has begun to become a tense fight. So tense that violence is going to erupt because of it. Pro-slavery fighters known as border ruffians are going to roam the areas in Kansas, particularly to harass anti-slavery settlements. And most famously, they'll burn down the town of Lawrence, Kansas in 1856. A very brutal massacre because the town of Lawrence was big on the movement for abolishing slavery and ensuring that it didn't spread in the Kansas area. Not only that, on the flip side of the coin, John Brown, this is going to be where he starts to launch his first series of murders against pro-slavery settlers. Only 20 miles south of Lawrence, he'll kill 5 slave-owning men in their beds with axes. And this report of violence is going to go back into the eastern United States, and they're going to nickname it Bleeding Kansas. This is going to become the nickname for that area. Not only that, but in the same year, in 1856, violence is going to spew on the Senate floor. Literally, Charles Sumner, in response to the Bleeding Kansas reports, he's going to put forth a speech in the Senate called The Crime Against Kansas, and he's going to state in here, what these southern border ruffians are doing to these poor anti-slavery settlers is criminal and unconstitutional. And you southern gentlemen sitting in that side of the room, you should be ashamed of yourselves, especially Andrew Butler, who's not sitting in his seat right now. He decided not to come in today because he knew I'd speak about this. So, and I'm dramatizing, of course, but Andrew Butler, the man that Charles Sumner from Massachusetts was trying to insult, of Andrew Butler of South Carolina, Andrew Butler's going to hear about this and he's going to say, oh yeah? He's going to send his nephew, a representative by the name of Preston Brooks, to the Senate floor just a few days later. He's a representative. He can't go to the Senate floor, but he's going to break in there. He's going to beat Charles Sumner over the head with a club for saying those words against his uncle. And in the shock of all of everything, even though Charles Sumner was beaten so poorly he couldn't go back into office for another few years, Massachusetts still reelected him back into office, saying, hey, even though he can't go back in there, that empty seat is going to prove that these Southerners are just brutal. While at the same time, South Carolinians are going to reelect Preston Brooks back into the representative house or office to say, hey, go back in there and continue what you're doing. As a matter of fact, we'll mail you some more clubs. And they literally do. So that way you can beat some more northern senators up upside the head if they ever say anything. So we're seeing now that violence is just a true thing now. If people are trying to say American politics are so divided today because they tweet so meanly to each other, I'm like, shoot, back in the 1850s, they were beating each other over the head. We are nowhere near what they were doing back then. So, with that said, we're also going to see some new faces and some new parties come about during this time too, as the issue of slavery is starting to boil into something new, something that we've never seen before in American history. You guys can see that picture of Stephen Douglas. Here's a map of the violence that's going on in Kansas at this time. But how is this issue going to build these new political parties? So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So for one thing, the Whig Party is now starting to go into decline. The Whigs that were formerly against the Democrats, those old Whigs like Zachary Taylor, Winfield Scott, they're going to start to die down as Henry Clay and Daniel Webster are no longer in the picture. They're now dead. So the Whigs are never going to hold another public office after 1852. So they're kind of done at this point. Not only that, there's a new political parties coming into town. The Know Nothings are a small but outspoken group. They don't want to touch the issue of slavery because they don't want to lose support, but they want to just make a very random platform at this time against resisting immigration into the United States. So they'll resist any European or non-American immigration, but whenever somebody asks them, like, what's your platform on your nativist organization, nativists being very pro people who are born in this country, what is your platform on slavery? And they would just say, I know nothing. That was literally what they were saying. They were literally given that nickname, the Know Nothings. What's the most successful party going to come out at this time, though? It's the Republican Party. When I say the Republican Party, I mean the Republican Party that's still alive today, the Donald Trump Republican Party. So this party is going to be built out of former Democrats and Whigs who are going to come together all for the platform of ending slavery. They're all about anti-slavery, not necessarily for racial purposes, but for political purposes to get rid of it and to maintain or stop Southern aggression. Some other platforms that they have is to end slavery because it's stifling industry. It's stifling the individual worker and the American. And also with that, we need to be focusing our efforts on building industry, growing our capitalist society, and continuing to expand international trade. This is their platform. So this is still going to resonate in the Republican Party today. So with that said, let's go further into how some of these different events are going to continue just to split the nation as we get further and closer and closer to 1860. So first thing, in the election of 1856, the Republican Party will choose its first presidential nominee, John C. Fremont, a hero of the Mexican-American War and a outspoken abolitionist. He'll lose to the Democrat James Buchanan, but it shows that the Republican Party has now made its track as the undivided contestant against the Democratic Party. Not only that, but a year later in 1857, a case will reach the Supreme Court, which was in the lesser courts a couple of years afterward or before that, but it was a very unique case. It's called the Dred Scott case. What's the story behind this? Well, an enslaved person who was living in Missouri at the time named Dred Scott, he and his master and some other people had moved up to Wisconsin during the 1830s and lived there for a few years and then moved back down to Missouri. Well, Dred Scott was realizing, wait a minute, I was living in Wisconsin for a few years, and that was a free state. Therefore, I'm on free soil. That makes me a free man. So he sued the court in Missouri, and it made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And everybody was thinking, well, this is a no-brainer. He was in free soil. He's going to be a free man. Not necessarily the case in the ruling, though. Chief Justice Roger Taney of Maryland, which was a southern state, remind you, he ruled against Scott's sue. Not only that, but he furthered his ruling by saying any African American, he didn't say enslaved person, he said any African American and their descendants are not citizens and they do not have the right to sue. Not only that, but the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional because it deprives slave owners of their property. Well, Southerners are going to love this because they're going to say, hey, he's not some Northern pander. He's going to adhere to what we think. And Northerners are going to look at it like, what the man? Because it's so out of the blue. And it's definitely showing that, well, we have free African Americans who've been living here for many decades. And now you're saying they don't have rights? What is up with that? So this is going to cause more sticks to be put into the fire at this point. And when I say sticks, I probably mean lighter fluid. So it's going to outrage northern states to say, hey, we should probably think about seceding from the Union to get away to fight back this slave power in the South. So it's going to continue to boil those harsh tensions. So a picture of Dred Scott right there. And now we're going to get into how politics is going to shape up into the last 4 years building up to 1860. So we know the election of 1860 with Abraham Lincoln, but what we don't know is how he got to that point. Well, in 1858, while senators are running for office in Illinois, they're going to pay particular attention to these two guys running for Senate office in Illinois. Those two guys are going to be Stephen Douglas, the guy who put forth the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and a tall, lanky, young former lawyer of Illinois who grew up in a poor farming family by the name of Abraham Lincoln. So these two guys are going to duke it out over the course of a couple weeks all throughout Illinois, and they're going to stand for different platforms. While Stephen Douglas is sympathetic towards slave owners and is trying to argue for popular sovereignty to continue, Abraham Lincoln is going to take the other side of the pole. He's going to state, hey, slavery is a morally corrupt institution. Not only that, but it's depriving poor farmers of their abilities to have economic flexibility because the power is given to these rich Southern elites who are getting all the money because they don't have to pay workers. So, and not only that, but popular sovereignty is a horrible idea. If you don't believe me, go check out Kansas and what they're doing right now. So these two guys, their platforms are going to reach national attention, and to a point that even though Stephen Douglas will win the Senate office in Illinois against Abraham Lincoln, the Republican Party is going to look at Abraham Lincoln like, this guy might be a good fit. So we might even choose him as our Republican nominee for the election of 1860 as the president. There's his picture right there. Now he's gonna look better in this picture than what he's gonna look like 4 years into office while he's president. And I pity this man because I do not want to be the president during this time. The worst time to ever be president during the Civil War. All right, last thing that we're going to talk about. So we talked about all these events, the Dred Scott, everything leading up from the Compromise of 1850, Bleeding Kansas, Harry Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, and all this stuff beating people over the head in the Senate floor. Well, now it's really going to come to a point of almost fear. So in 1859, John Brown, who was that hero of the anti-slavery movement by murdering pro-slavery settlers in Kansas, he's going to make his way back to Virginia in an attempt to launch a slave revolt throughout the South. His plan was to take over the arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, and to take all the arms and bring them out to enslaved peoples and raise an army. Unfortunately, it doesn't pull through. The news of this doesn't get out, and it doesn't really reach a lot of the ears of enslaved peoples. So unfortunately, John Brown is going to lose that fight at Harper's Ferry. He's going to be caught and subdued by federal troops. He's going to be put on trial and executed for treason. But his act is going to resonate throughout the South. The South is going to be, oh my God, we have Northerners who are trying to take us over. And the North is going to be, this guy's got it right. He's going to be a liberator for us. So with all that said, we're now going to start our way moving to the election of 1860.